All right. When it comes to what is and what isn't canon, things can get a little murky, especially in today's super multiverse-y thirsty environment. We have a craving for what ifs and retcons, and so much so that defining the canonical, I'm not sure if that's a word, I think it's a word, canonical storyline can be really challenging. Earlier. Yeah, we were talking about it earlier. I think it's a word, right? It feels like a word, right? So tonight we're asking the question, what is canon? And Cape, I believe you've done some research on this. You've done the whole thing, and plus, you've already got the alternate version of you with the shadows coming off of your glasses right now, making this like alt version of evil Cape. So why don't you take us through and tell us what is canon?
I'm wearing my Big Daddy Hand Cannon shirt, but go on, Kate. We'll get into
That's pretty awesome. I like it. So anyways, canon, many people really get confused of when they start different kinds of fandoms and so on and so forth. And it goes all the way back from, biblical times and Islam and all that, which typically means official. When you hear a bunch of nerds talking, they want to know what is the official canon of something. Such as when I asked Dodd and Jake about Mando, I asked, was it canon? And many people who don't understand canon get really confused. And it can also be known as, like, when people said Shakespeare's canon, they said these works were the works done by Shakespeare and these works were not. So these that we know that were done by Shakespeare, these were the canon. So it can get awfully confusing, and sometimes reading about something or knowing what is canon, what isn't. But there's a lot of debates and confusingness. But to use a prime example, many people also use something called retcon. Now, retcon is short for retroactive continuity, which essentially means they go back, and when they have a point that they want to bring back and mention, they bring it back up. For example, Joe Chill getting killed by Joe Chill killing the Waynes. And many people will say, oh, it was Joe Chill. Well, that's a retcon, because many people back in the 80s, they brought back Joe Chill just to show someone that killed the Waynes. Because before then, Bruce just thought it was any villain that he came in contact with. But as Dodd and Kev well know, there are two consistents in the Marvel universe, and it's said that Cap dies and Uncle Ben dies. Now, so if you go all the way back to the original source, you'll have the official canon, but sometimes things can come back and be retcon, as I said. So this kind of goes into continuity as a whole. For dweebs that don't know what that means, that consists of, like, comics have been going on for a very long time. And this is also for Star Wars. This is for many different things. Even Pokemon, I'm sure Dodd knows all kinds of, canon stuff with Pokemon as a whole. Now, there are also alternate versions of characters, such as, there's Watchmen, and Watchmen was made by DC, but is it part of the DC universe? Or Hellboy even? They weren't part of they're part of their own respective universes, but not until, as of late, they began coming into the canon stream, such as before Watchmen and so on and so forth. And so the multiverse in Marvel get kind of sticky, and, this is kind of used to bridge stuff from worlds to universes, and, it can be pretty much pertain to any fandom that you choose. Now, this is all sticky and it's a big web and all that, and I'm hoping I got everything right. But Kev, do you think I'm missing anything here or what?
No, if you missed it, I damn sure wouldn't pick it up, because
I hope I was making sense.
I think out of everyone here, I think I'm the least canon qualified as far as qualifying what is canon.
I think we all know a little bit about canon just by being in fandom. I don't think we got that definition out there definitively, but canon is just a collection or list of books that are accepted as genuine. What's accepted as genuine? What's accepted as part of the series, the fandom is one that they categorize a lot. However you want to classify it. What is really Star Wars and what is extended universe that is non-canon? What is the MCU and what is a story involving MCU characters that was told at some child's birthday? Like, those two things both exist within the same world, but one is canon and one's not.
Yeah.
But once what was once something, there are situations when things go in and out of canon. We talked a little bit about Star Wars earlier. I mean, Cape, you brought up Watchmen, you brought up some of these kind of pocket universes in kind of canonical chaos, if you will. What was once something that was non-canon that you were eager to see become canon?
I mean, for me personally, it's definitely Batman Beyond. I mean, just because for a long time, is it part of this? It was once part of the DC animated universe, and then eventually, Dick Grayson got into the timeline, so did Hush, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And it still was sticky, but it was less than sticky. But for a long time, I think what you call it, Dog, right, is headcanon.
Yeah. What you want to believe.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it, I think. You put it very nicely that way. And I don't know, what about you, Kev?
Well, I'll say what it broadly, but that ultimately became canon. But something that I think a lot of people don't think about is, if you're a fan of the Mass Effect world, the indoctrination theory, I believe, should have been canon, because that would have fixed all their problems, but they chose not to accept that. So
yeah,
don't want to get too far into it, but my Mass Effect heads out there know the pain.
I think now. Okay, go ahead. I thought you were done.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Oh, well, I guess for me, with learning some of the stuff about Star Wars, and what was rejected and thrown out of canon, what was accepted as canon, which a lot of that I've just recently become enlightened with. I think, Ahsoka. I think that's what so many people, or Ahsoka, what so many people were excited about seeing her in Mandalorian meant, because previously she'd only existed in the extended universe. And so with that, that opens up a whole new level of possibilities. That means Rebels could be in there. That means that a bunch of different storylines could open up. Right. So something that was, again, not canon becoming canon, I think that's one of them that really takes the cake for me, at least. Are there anything that was originally canon that you're sad to see go? For example, X-Men retcons or Star Wars. Anything, Cape?
There's nothing that's sad to see go, but I mean, there's some stuff that I wish people would accept as canon in a way, but I think with Star Wars, a lot of people are very mad about what's not considered canon and all that. I think that's more than anything else, but there's a lot of stuff that I wish people would see as canon, but they had a retcon trumpet, like who killed Uncle Ben, but that's always changing. But just little things that people don't really remember, like how X-Men are intertwined, That's all sticky, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Kev, what about you? Is there anything that was originally canon that you're sad to see become not canon anymore?
Darth Plagueis.
Yeah.
I mean, that he was, he was only Senator Palpatine's, master.
Right.
So, is that where the memes come from?
Yes.
Have you ever told you Dark Plagueis with the Wise or whatever?
Yeah.
And he's still in the thing is, Dark Plagueis is still in Star Wars canon, right? He still exists in Star Wars canon. He's in a weird spot. As far as all the rejected people, because Sidious does mention him directly by name.
Right.
Now, him being his backstory, everything about him that we knew from the extended universe That all isn't.
Right. His
That's
existence is canon, but everything else he's done that is written is not.
exactly. And so,
Which
and there's a
basically
lot of
makes
really
him
cool,
who he is.
right? And there's a lot of really cool stuff in there. I mean, Sidious. The only thing we really do know that permeates through the extended universe and made it into canon for sure is the fact that Sidious is the one that conquered death. Plagueis is the one that originally conquered death with the Force. And so we know that is that Plagueis that's his big thing. Of course, the irony is he was ended up struck down by his apprentice, who ended up being Sidious. Now that whole backstory aspect of it, really, we don't even know that in as far as Star Wars. So that is all gone, just like that. So that's one that I do think is really sad to see go. And I think that. That I think we're gonna hit a lot of the ones in the non-canon characters that it was kind of sad to see fall off of those trends, especially with the big, the big DC canon severing, if you will.
Severing, good way of putting it.
Yeah, with series like Elseworlds and Marvel's What If. Franchises really use some of these, kind of creative ideas or just, kind of the roll of the dice scenarios to explore a bunch of these non-canonical things out there. And what advantages do you see for series like What If or Elseworlds that kind of don't have the consequences of being in canon? Kate, let's start with you.
So I typically saw Gotham as a Elseworld because it was kind of a what if type scenario, but also they kind of modge-podged from different areas. And I think the advantage is you get to play with storylines. One of my favorite Elseworld comics, I haven't read a lot of what ifs, but one of my favorite Elseworlds is called The Nail. And it's about what if a nail got in the tire of the Kents. And so Superman becomes Superman, and not a spoiler, but he becomes Amish. So the Justice League forms and all that without Superman. And when Joker kills Jason Todd, then he freaks out, Batman freaks out, and he essentially, goes on a killing spree. Mm-hmm. And if Superman wasn't there to kind of ground him, then what would have that been like? But it kind of plays with small little plots that can affect the whole story, not just the nail, but that's just a good prime example. But also get to play with characters and get to play with plots that you typically probably couldn't with the main canon storyline. So I think it's more playroom and kind of one-shot type stuff.
Yeah. Kev, what about you? Advantages to series like What Ifs, Elseworlds, what do they have?
I think Kate hit the nail on the head where you can kind of experiment with different storylines. And then sometimes those things end up becoming canon if they're popular enough. So I think that's the advantage. You can kind of A/B test what works, and if it makes sense to your current canonical storyline. And if it doesn't, then you just have a nice piece of non-canon content that people will kind of fan over.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can kind of throw it in the trash can and just, whatever. It's non-canon. Right. Are there really any disadvantages to having series like that, though? I mean, because if you do create something great, do you really build off it? I mean, you can always have the opportunity to build off of it, right? If you want to. Is there really any disadvantages to having this non-canonical chaos like What Ifs and Elseworlds?
I think.
Go ahead, Kate.
I think mainly it's just if someone doesn't know what they're getting into, then they're confused. A good example is, correct me on this one, Dodd, but I said, are they like shinies? How is it not like shinies?
Right. Because shinies are simply a different variant of Pokemon, but they're in the Pokemon lore, right? For example, the Legend of the Red Gyarados is part of the Johto region, right? And the Red Gyarados is just a shiny Gyarados, right? We know now after, playing through the game that shinies are just a 1 in a million variant within the Pokemon universe, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing as having an albino in the wild, right? Yeah. And so, but they're in the anime, they're in the game, they're in every aspect of the game. So they're just simply a different part of the game. It's just, you know, instead of I mean, it's kind of different because creature capture games are very unique in the aspect of like you're kind of like trying to breed wildlife and capture wildlife kind of thing, but it's still canonically in the same kind of thing. Whereas Elseworlds, for example, you know, what if scenarios are like, you know, what if Captain America was born in the zombie verse and you had a zombie Captain America, someone who was trying to eat people's flesh but had Captain America's abilities and powers. Now, that doesn't mean that Captain America is now a zombie, right?
Right.
But with shinies, like there are shiny Pokemon that exist within the universe that those things coincide, right? Their zombie Cap in this scenario exists alongside Cap. So that's I think is the main difference. If that helps explain anything, Cape.
Yeah, definitely. It's more of an evolved type thing, and I know good and well you want a pirate wielding Batman. There's a version of it, but the thing is, it's not canon. It's its own universe. But you know,
right? And I think like stories like that, like Jonah Hex, really did well in Elseworld stuff because you could kind of really develop that out. And kind of like go through what Gotham was like in the Old West. But there were storylines that really didn't have consequences on what your bread and butter content were, you know?
Yeah. Right.
If you guys could make your own what if scenario to be made into either a TV or film or Elseworlds or anything like that, something non-canon, if you could take your own twist to canon, to any canon out there, what would you do?
Yeah, I would do like Batman, but and this is actually I'm pretty sure this has been done. Just like Batman, but Assassin's Creed style, where like Batman is actually a creed and it's been passed down throughout history. So you have like
that's pretty.
Oh, yeah, that would be fun.
Kind of reminds me of the Phantom. The Phantom would have the ghost who walks. He would always have the person, his grandfather, and they always thought it was the same person. The one I thought of, I actually wrote a story about in high school. It's called Gotham Elites, where I read a story about how a guy, he would say every Batman villain is a reflection of Bruce if he didn't make a decision. And it really made me think about it for a bit. And what was interesting is what I did was I called it Gotham Elites, GE. And so it was Bruce Wayne's parents get shot, but he doesn't take on the mantle of the Bat. And it essentially was like a Christmas story where Bruce saw his life if he never became Batman. And each villain would become, like, Poison Ivy was the head of the architecture district, you know. Joker or Jack was head of the
analysis. That sounds like a really shitty story, though. Like from just hearing it, it's like if Batman's parents got dead and then he just never did anything with it. He was just like, oh well, you know, that really sucks. It's just Batman's parents got shot in the streets, and then he went to therapy about it. And, just started really dealing with his issues head on, and you know, he didn't go fight. It seems like that would wrap up in like a quick 30-second story. How did they make that interesting?
Yeah, well, just mainly just taking his consciousness of being Batman. You know, you've seen the Batman animated series episode Perchance to Dream.
I don't know. It's been a while. I mean, that you're talking about a series that's like 20 years old, man.
I'll probably watch it a lot, but it's where Mad Hatter essentially gets into his head of like, hey, you know, like it showed Bruce going to the clock going, Alfred, I need to get to the Batcave. And he's like, oh, very funny, Master Bruce. Your parents are going to be here soon. My parents? You know, like, kind of took in that same vein, you know?
Yeah. Like a stolen identity. It's body swap movie.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
I think if we're going
Friday Batman.
Yeah.
If we're going with the Star Wars trend that I've been bringing up lately, I've thought of what if Vader killed Sidious at the end of The Empire Strikes Back, and Luke joins with his dad. Basically, follows the same route that his dad did, but still follows the Sith rule of there can only be two, and raises Vader into that Sith Lord position, and Luke into the one below him. I mean, I think that would be
Pretty sick.
yeah, it'd be a really interesting storyline,
Yeah.
especially because at that point in the storyline, at Empire Strikes Back, you're at the retaliation of the Empire, and so they're trying to come back and really kind of counterpunch after they've been knocked out in Episode 4, really.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like the final blow for the Empire, but that could open up that could basically make the war go on for a whole nother series, and we could see more stuff that exists within that Mandalorian timeline, and maybe even see the Mandalorians themselves get involved to help stop the Empire. That'd be interesting.
All right, that would be kind of cool. Huh.
I just like how it's just a minor decision.
Darth Jar Jar is 100% headcanon for Gonzo.
Oh god.
Yeah. So Batman Beyond is an interesting one. Gonzo mentioned that in chat as well. Like, to me, that gets into a little bit of a gray area. Is that necessarily because it could be canon, but it's future world canon? Like, it's in the future. It doesn't happen now. And so it still has a lot of the same impacts of non-canon stuff, right? Anything that happens in that world doesn't have immediate impacts right then on the actual canon world,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good point.
That's true. Those are always interesting. Like you said, it's still like nothing's written in stone, but it's already written. So it's weird. Like, Terry McGinnis does become the new Batman, but maybe not. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. Like, that's why when we were suggesting what's canon, I was like, I didn't know Terry was canon. I thought he wasn't. I guess that's why he's in that weird future canon space.
Yeah. Yep. You never know.
Yeah.
So one last question for you guys on this topic of what is canon. Do complex fandoms with multiple timelines, not necessarily all of them being canon, deter people away from entering fandom, or the opposite? Cape, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would argue it would deter people. I mean, from the get-go. I mean, when I'm trying to understand a universe that I don't know, like, I'm trying to always learn about Pokemon from you because you have such a passion for it. But, like, it deters people away because they're like, but what if, like, they get, and then you gotta be that elite comic book person of, well, actually, and then it just really turns people off because you're like, okay, I don't care anymore, but once you get into the meat and the potatoes, you want the alternate versions and all that. I think it deters people away, but I think Marvel is going on a better route. I mean, WandaVision and all that's trying. Like, someone said that Falcon and Winter Soldier wasn't canon, and people are like, "No,
I think that's canon.
That's canon." Yeah.
What about you? Because I got a little bit different feels, Kev. What do you think? Do complex fandoms with multiple timelines, not all of them necessarily being canon, deter people away from entering a new fandom, or the opposite?
I think it deters people because you want to know what's going on in the story and why you should get invested. And if you don't know where to start or where one end begins and ends, it can be kind of overwhelming. And you can kind of get inundated that stuff and turned off from the beginning. I think, like, for me, I think that's why, until recently as an adult, I was never really into comics. Because for that reason, right? Like, I wasn't, like, I liked the comic book lore. I love superheroes and stuff, but I didn't dive fully into it outside of, like, I guess what was canon, right? Because I just felt like it was too much. And if anyone, and I try to, like, use, like, people who are sort of uninitiated with comic books and superheroes and stuff as an example or as a benchmark, it's confusing because most stories are what they are, right? They're linear. And with canon, in a way, it's like, yes, it's linear, but then you have all these sort of areas outside of the line that exist. They just never, like, alternate universe, if you will. They're parallel, but they don't really touch it. And it's like, wait, what? Why do I have to learn about that? And it's not until you, like, really, I think, have an appreciation for this kind of stuff that you start to appreciate canon. So I think it can be kind of a deterrent.
I understand y'all's points, and I do. I feel that way at times. I do think that one, this is what DC's situation is right now. Okay, DC Comics in general, and two, I think that DC, like, any fandom that has multiple timelines, not necessarily all of them being canon, actually helps bring people into the fandom, and I'll tell you why. When you have multiple entry points, some of them that are not, especially if they're not, One Piece size long, canons or storylines that you need to follow. You can have this kind of snackable content here, and it's like, ooh, piece of candy, ooh, piece of candy, ooh, piece of candy, and now you're thoroughly along into the process once you've taken some more of these smaller, bite-sized pieces of content. Now, when you have situations like Star Wars, where it's this is canon and this is not canon, and all of it's now detached because of one kind of big severing, that is where it gets really complicated, because this is canon, that's canon. But when you have stuff where it's like DC's Elseworlds or the Joker, or just DC Comics in general right now, where you can enjoy a Joker storyline outside of the Justice League that Josh Whedon created, and it exists. You don't need any startup for it. It's not very confusing. Like, a lot of people still saw Joker. It didn't confuse them that it wasn't part of the Justice League timeline or anything else like that. They just enjoyed it for what it was. And once you got there, you kind of understood that it was something different than what she'd been there before. Like, it kind of made it obvious. And so I do think, actually, that having a fandom that is kind of chopped up like that, where you have all these little entry points, is an advantage for that. Yeah.
Jake's in the nail on the head, though. He's saying about how there's so many people like Batman that isn't canon, and same with people with most things in deep lore. You get those actually people that really just turn you off to it as a whole.
Yeah. I would agree with that last sentiment that Jake's saying there, and the canon policing is the biggest deterrent, in my opinion. And I think that is something that is big out there. When you talk about like what is or isn't canon, like, fuck whether or not it's canon or not. I think it's cool and I enjoy it. I
agree with that.
As with most things.
Yeah.
Yeah.